Let's be honest, when you think of an accountant, what comes to mind? Someone buried under a mountain of paper, right? Well, I want you to forget that stereotype. The finance function has gone through this incredible transformation, from a quiet back office department to a strategic powerhouse right at the heart of the business. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how that happened and, more importantly, what it means for you and your CIMA exam.
Hey, welcome to our CIMA E1 Masterclass. Today, we're tackling a really crucial topic, the structure and shape of the finance function. By the time we're done here, you're not just going to know the textbook theory. You'll actually see how massive companies like Apple, Unilever, and Siemens are putting these ideas into practice every single day. So let's get you exam ready.
So, what's our journey look like? First, we'll look at the big transformation in finance. Then, we'll map out how organizations are actually built. After that, we'll dive into how automation is shaking things up. And finally, we'll cover the modern playbook for success. Before we wrap it all up with a quick recap, let's get started. Okay, our first stop is probably the single most important idea in this entire chapter. It's this fundamental shift, this evolution, from finance being a backward-looking scorekeeper to a forward-looking strategic partner. And trust me, this isn't just a small tweak. It's a complete reimagining of what finance is all about. This slide nails the difference perfectly. On the left, you've got the old-school scorekeeper. They were always looking in the rearview mirror, reacting to what happened last month, focused on compliance, and just controlling costs. But on the right, that's where we are today, the value creator. This is proactive, it's strategy-driven, and it's all about creating future value. Getting this distinction down cold is absolutely fundamental for CIMA E1. So let's make this real. Take a company like Unilever. A few decades ago, their finance team would have just been reporting the quarterly profits. End of story. But now, their finance team is at the table, actively modeling the financial impact of their big sustainability goals. They're linking things like carbon footprint directly to long-term shareholder value. See the difference? That's scorekeeper versus value creator, right there in action.
All right, let's move on. Now, here's the thing. Before we can understand how a finance department is structured, we first have to zoom out and understand how the entire organization is put together. It's kind of like you can't understand the layout of one apartment until you've seen the blueprint for the whole building, right?
And for that blueprint, we turn to a fantastic model from a guy named Henry Mintzberg. He said that pretty much any organization is made up of 5 core parts. Let's use Apple to make this easy. At the very top, you have the strategic apex. That's Tim Cook and the C-suite setting the vision. Then you have the middle line. These are the VPs and managers who translate that vision into action. The operating core, that's your frontline staff, the people in the Apple stores and on the factory floors. The technostructure is made up of the analysts and engineers who design the work processes. And finally, you've got support staff like HR and IT. CIMA loves testing this, so knowing these 5 blocks is a must.
So how do you arrange those 5 blocks? Well, traditionally, we've had a few main ways. You've got the functional structure, like at Coca-Cola, where everyone's grouped by their job, all the marketers together, all the finance people together. Then there's the divisional structure, like at Procter & Gamble, where they organize around different brands, like Tide or Pampers. A geographic structure, which McDonald's uses, is based on countries or regions. And finally, the complex matrix structure, seen at places like NASA, where an engineer might report to both their project manager and their engineering department head. For your exam, you'll need to think about which structure fits which situation.
But of course, the business world doesn't stand still. So now we've got these more modern, fluid structures. You have the boundaryless organization, where a company like Tesla tries to smash down the walls between departments like R&D and sales so they can innovate faster. Then there's the Shamrock organization, which has 3 leaves, a tiny core of essential staff, a bunch of outside contractors, and a flexible temporary workforce. Uber is the perfect example of this. And a networked organization is basically a web of small, agile teams that come together for projects and then disband. Okay, let's quickly clarify 2 terms that, trust me, often trip students up on the exam. On the left, you have the scalar chain. That's just the formal line of authority from the CEO all the way down to the frontline worker. Think of a traditional bank's rigid hierarchy. It's very clear who's in charge, but man, is it slow. Now, on the right, you have span of control. This is simply the number of people a manager is responsible for. A really wide span of control, like you see in many teams at Amazon, creates a very flat organization. A narrow span creates a tall one. And that idea of span of control leads us directly to this comparison. A vertical or tall structure has lots of layers of management and that narrow span of control we just talked about. A classic example is an old-school insurance company, very hierarchical. On the flip side, a horizontal or flat structure, like you'd find at Netflix, has very few layers and a wide span of control. This empowers teams, speeds up decisions, and makes the whole company way more agile.
Companies don't just structure themselves internally, they also team up with others. A joint venture, like Sony and Ericsson did for phones, creates a whole new company. A franchise, like Subway, is basically licensing out your entire business model. A consortium, like the different European companies that build parts for Airbus planes, is a collaboration on a single massive project. Agents act on behalf of another company. In a strategic alliance, like the one between Starbucks and Alibaba in China, is a partnership for a specific goal without creating a new entity. The key is just matching the alliance type to the goal.
All right, let's pivot and talk about the biggest driver of change in the modern world: technology. Automation, AI, and data analytics, they aren't just new tools. They are fundamentally reshaping the very structure of the finance team itself. This section is all about managing finance in a digital world, and it's where we see some of the most radical changes happening right now. So you can actually trace the evolution of the finance team's shape. We started with the classic pyramid. The CFO was at the top, you had layers of managers, and then a huge base of clerks doing all the manual data entry. Step 2 was the segregated model, where companies split the function into a transactional unit for things like accounts payable and a separate, high-level analytical unit. But now we're in step 3, the digital age diamond. And here it is. This is the digital diamond, the new model for a modern finance function. Now, the 4 traditional roles are still here: the steward who handles controls, the operator who focuses on efficiency, the strategist who helps plan the future, and the catalyst who drives change. But look right in the middle, at the core, we have a new role: the technologist and data scientist. Technology is no longer just a tool, it's the central hub that powers everything else. This is a critical diagram for understanding the modern finance team. And Siemens is a perfect real-world example of this diamond in action. They've literally put artificial intelligence and advanced data analytics right at the very heart of their finance function. This tech core automates all the routine tasks for the operator, it generates incredible insights for the strategist, and it frees up their finance people to act as catalysts for change throughout the business. You see? The technology at the center enables and supercharges all the other roles around it. So, knowing that the finance team is changing shape, what are the actual strategies and models companies are using to build a modern, effective finance function? Let's get practical and look at the playbook. Okay, there are 3 key strategies you have to know. First, shared service centers, or SSCs. This is when a big company like GlaxoSmithKline centralizes all its routine finance tasks, like payroll or accounts payable, into one efficient global hub. Second, you have outsourcing. This is when you hire a completely different company, like Accenture, to run a part of your finance operations for you. And third, offshoring. This is simply moving a part of your own company's operations to another country, usually to save on costs, like when JP Morgan moves finance jobs to India. Now, you might wonder why a company would choose to outsource. Well, the answer lies in a really powerful idea called transaction cost theory. All it really says is that a company will choose to outsource something when it becomes cheaper to buy that service from an expert than it is to make it or do it themselves. It's a simple but brilliant idea that drives billions of dollars in business decisions. Sometimes, though, just moving the work around isn't enough. You need something more dramatic, called business process reengineering, or BPR. Now, this isn't about making small improvements. This is about taking a core process, throwing it out, and redesigning it from a completely blank slate. The classic example is what Ford did back in the 80s. They didn't just try to speed up their paper-based accounts payable process. They totally re-engineered it with technology and ended up slashing their headcount in that department by 75%. That's BPR. Okay, everyone, listen up, because this is a classic CIMA exam trap. Do not confuse these 2 terms. On the left, segregation of duties is an internal control to prevent fraud. It means you split up tasks so that one person can't, say, approve a payment, make the payment, and then record it in the books. On the right, segregation of the finance function is a structural decision, like choosing to split off your transactional work into a shared service center. One is about fraud prevention. The other is about organizational design. Huge difference. And this whole journey we've been on, from scorekeeper to value creator powered by technology, it all leads to one of the most exciting roles in modern finance today, the finance business partner. This is where finance professionals are no longer stuck in their own silo. They're actually embedded directly into other business units. They're sitting right there with the sales teams or the R&D teams, which is something Microsoft does a lot. They provide real-time strategic advice, helping those departments make smarter, more profitable decisions. This is the ultimate expression of that value creator role we talked about at the very beginning.
Phew, we have covered a ton of ground, from core organizational theory all the way to the cutting edge of the digital finance team. So let's lock in all that learning with a super fast recap of the absolute must-know points for your CIMA E1 exam. Okay, let's nail down these key takeaways. Number 1, the big theme is that finance has moved from being a historical scorekeeper to a strategic value creator. Got it. Number 2, for organizational structure, you have to master Mintzberg's 5 building blocks and know the difference between traditional and modern structures. Number 3, technology's impact. Remember the evolution from the pyramid shape to the tech-driven digital diamond. And finally, number 4, the modern playbook. Know what shared service centers are, understand outsourcing, and most importantly, appreciate the rise of the finance business partner. If you focus on these 4 areas, you're going to be in fantastic shape for your exam. Great job.